You see, friends, the Bible says that God is holy, and heaven is holy, and this word holy, it just means perfect. It's really important to understand that God cannot let anything imperfect into heaven, otherwise it wouldn't be heaven. The Bible also says that all of us, we've got a body and we've got a soul. And at death, our bodies are either buried or cremated. There it goes. But you see, your soul, which is like the real you, that actually lives on forever, either in heaven or hell. And ultimately, the Bible says there's no third place for it to go. But unfortunately, friends, we've got a bit of a problem. Because the Bible says that if we've broken just one of God's laws, whether we've lied once, cheated once, hated once, just once, like we all have, let's be honest, then our soul becomes imperfect and we can no longer enter heaven. We become like a lost soul. Now let me ask you a quick question here. But do you know anyone that's never broken any of God's laws? Well, the answer is obviously no, and neither do I. So here's our problem. You see, all people have broken God's laws. Therefore, all people have imperfect souls. So if that makes any sense to you, then just think of the logic of this. But if at death, if your soul could either go to heaven or hell, and of course to get to heaven we're going to have this perfect record which none of us have, then sadly all of us must be headed for hell. Now people say to me, Tony, that seems very harsh. And people say, how can a loving God make a place called hell? Let alone send someone there. I mean, surely a loving God would never do that, would he? Doesn't the Bible say God is love? Well, let me explain to you very quickly why God would make a place called hell. I want you to think of somebody in your life that you really love. Now, we live in a really harsh world, so let's say, God forbid, the person you love was brutally murdered. Boom, they're shot. They catch the murderer, who's brought before a court of law, and the murderer pleads guilty. But to your horror, the judge says this. He says, well, this is a really bad thing that you've done. But because I'm a loving judge, well, I'm just going to let you off. Now, my goodness, we're going to be very angry about that, aren't we? But why do you think we're going to be angry? It's because you know that when someone's broken the law, well, they've got to be punished. Otherwise, there's no justice. So you see, hell is not a love issue. In fact, it never was. Hell's a justice issue. Now, I want to ask you 3 questions that someone asked me that help me understand why God would make a place called hell. Now, I've told lies in my life. Would you have ever told a lie in your life? Well, if you have, well, like me, you'll be guilty of being a liar. And if your answer is no, well, that's probably the second lie you just told. Now, I've taken things that don't belong to me in my life. Would you have taken anything that doesn't belong to you, even as a child? Well, if you have, that also makes you guilty of being a thief. So already, you and I, we're a bunch of thieving liars. Now, do you really think God will let a bunch of thieving liars like you and me into heaven? Well, you see, I don't think he would. Because if he did, he would be the same as the unjust judge, who also failed to punish the murderer of the one you love. You see, we can't have it both ways. But people quickly tell me, but Tony, wait a minute, I'm a law-abiding citizen. And I go to church or I give money to charities, and I do lots of good things. I'm a good person at heart. And lying and stealing is one thing, but Tony, I'm still not as bad as you because I've never murdered a person. I'm not a murderer. But what I think is really interesting is the way Jesus redefined words like murder. Because the Bible says that if you've ever hated someone in your heart, it's just as bad as murdering the person in your heart. So you see, in criminal law, well, of course, we've got to commit the crime to be guilty. But in God's law, we've merely got to think it and we're guilty. So last question, but have you ever hated in your life? Well, I have, and if you have, that means we're also guilty of being murderers, according to the Bible. So we're now lying, thieving murderers. This is getting better and better, isn't it? Now that's only 3 of the 10 commandments. We're not going to talk about the other 7 because that'll just get embarrassing. But if God was going to judge you and me by the 10 commandments, we will most certainly be guilty. And that's the bad news. For the sake of justice, there's got to be this place called hell. But really, I want to share some good news with you. You see, we can all be forgiven, and that's the reason why Jesus is my superhero. He's my hero for so many reasons. Here's just two for you. For a start, I think it's pretty amazing still how he split the timeline. I'm talking about BC, AD, Christmas, and Easter. These four events are based around his life. These events that are in our diaries and our calendars and our computers. And yet people have just very ignorantly forgotten that. But by far, the most amazing thing about Jesus has got to be the huge difference between his soul and ours. Because we're all imperfect for breaking his laws, but Jesus is so different because he's perfect. Now let me show you what happens 2,000 years ago before he came to this planet. You see, Jesus looked forward in time and he saw you and me here right now. There's Jesus on the right-hand side, and that's meant to be God the Father sitting on the throne. And Jesus turned to God and said, Father, I really love those people watching this presentation, and I don't want them to go to hell for breaking your laws. Is there a way for them to be forgiven? And that's when God turned to Jesus and said, well, Jesus, there's one way. My son, I love you. But if you go to earth and you become a human being, you live a perfect life on earth like no one else ever has, and then you die a cruel, painful death on a cross and be totally abandoned to take the punishments which all those people watching this presentation justly deserve for breaking my laws, then I'll make it possible for every one of them to be forgiven when they actually ask you to exchange their imperfect record for your perfect record. And Jesus said, well, I'll do it because I love all of those people. And according to the world's history books, Jesus Christ did that. He laid down his life for you and for me. And in my opinion, there's no greater love than that, than when a person lays down their life for you. But that's just my opinion. But there's still something that we've got to do to be forgiven, and that's what I want to show you now. Because the Bible says that there are three major events in our lives. Of course, there's birth and death, which we ultimately have no control over. But the third major event in our life, which we do have control over, is the day when we ask Jesus to forgive us. Is that day when we actually ask Jesus to give us his perfect record. Now, contrary to popular opinion, we're not forgiven by being christened or baptized or confirmed or praying or going to church or believing God exists or trying to be good or even getting religious. These are good things, but none of those things, they give us forgiveness. Jesus said there's only two things that will. The first one is this. He said we must be willing to turn away what was wrong in our lives and say sorry to Jesus. Now please notice that what I'm saying to you is willing. There may be some things in our lives that we feel powerless to give up in our own strength. And that's okay. Because God will help us with those things. But we must be willing and want to turn away from them and say sorry to Jesus. And put our trust in him that he has the power to not only forgive us, but also to have the power to help us overcome those things. The second thing he said we must do to be forgiven is we've got to surrender our lives to Jesus. And all surrender really means is this. It means that if God made you in your mother's womb, and if God made the entire universe that surrounds you, well, don't you think God deserves to be the central person in your life? That's all the word means. Surrender is more like a change of attitude, where we really begin to acknowledge that Jesus is God. And we stop talking about it and start living it out, day by day by day, through everything, lifestyles, decisions and choices, the way we spend our time and our money. That's so hard. That's why that one is a lifelong struggle. But unless we're willing to do those two things, the Bible says it's impossible to be forgiven, and at death it's impossible to enter heaven. So say you've decided to turn and surrender and be forgiven. Let me just show you very quickly what it'll be like for you when you die. You see, this here is meant to be the delivery suite where you were born. That's your mum lying down, she's given birth to you. The lady standing is the midwife. And in her arms, that baby's meant to be you. And on that day when you were born, it's as though God opens this book about your life. But please bear in mind that God never sleeps. And he sees every attitude, every thought, every motive, and every action. And every time we break just one of God's laws is written down in that book. And of course you can imagine that by the end of our life, well, of course there's an entire library written against us. To my shame, I'll probably have a bigger library than you. But when we turn and surrender, what happens is this. God takes your book and he stands at the top of a cliff like that up there, and he tears out those pages from your book of every wrong thing you've ever done. The big things, the small things, it doesn't matter. He tears them away and throws them into the deepest sea and promises never to remember those things again. He then takes a copy of his perfect record, which I really hope you've asked him for, and he puts it inside the cover of your empty book, with your name written on the spine of that book. And then that book is then stored like a precious library book in heaven. And as you know, precious library books are not touched. Well, neither is your book. It is not touched again between the point that you turn and surrender your life to Jesus in a real and genuine way in your heart and mind, and the point that you die one day. Even though in that space of time there, you're probably going to let God down again and again and again. Which shows that when you become a Christian, you don't suddenly become perfect in all of your thoughts and words and actions. And neither does this mean you can say one prayer to God and go to church all in your life and listen to nice songs and sermons and think that you're sweet with God. No, what this means is that when God gives you his perfect record, it is so perfect. It has this miraculous power to forgive us for our entire lives, from birth to death. And then when you die, well, you're going to go before God on Judgment Day. There's you at the bottom, next to an angel at the foot of God. And God will command his angels to go and fetch your book. He's going to look inside your book and he's going to say to you, well, you were perfect. And we're going to turn around to him and say, well, no, I wasn't, because I broke your laws. I agreed, I'm a lying, thieving murderer. Don't I justly deserve this, to go to hell? And Jesus will say to us, for the sake of justice, you do deserve to go to hell. You did break my laws, and some of my laws you broke many times. But you, my beautiful son or daughter, you have my perfect record, which I gave to you on that day when you turned and surrendered to me on earth, and I forgave you. So welcome to heaven. And that's the reason why Jesus Christ is my superhero, because he did all of that for somebody as disgusting as me. And if he can change my life, he can change anybody's life on this entire planet. But as we finish, what would happen if you never turn and surrender your life to Jesus? The Bible says that when you die, you're going to go before God on Judgment Day. God will look at you and he's going to start to cry. And he's going to say, well, I'm sorry, people watching this presentation, but I can't let you into heaven. I have to send you to hell. Because you see, you never asked me to forgive you. Yes, you did many good things, and I remember those good things, but I needed you to turn and surrender your life to me. And I loved you so much, there were more than 6 ways I tried to get through to you in your life. First, I died on the cross for you. You know what? You did the crime, but I did the real time, because I was crucified for the sins of mankind. Secondly, don't you remember that little presentation that Tony shared with you? He did explain that message to you. Don't say nobody told me. Third, there are churches throughout the whole of your area and the whole wide world. Some of them were good and some I was even ashamed of. But you got to try to find the good ones, because they were out there. Fourth, I gave you a conscience so that you could tell the difference between what's right and what's wrong. You knew the difference. Fifth, I created a world around you that was so beautiful and so magnificent and so awesome. How could you not know I made that world? And finally, I rose from the dead to prove to you that I'm God and that every word I said to you was true, but you still did nothing. Because I'm God and I made you, I love you. And because I love you, I can't force you to go to heaven if you really don't want to go to heaven. That would be stealing the free will that I gave you. So I have to do what you're insisting on and send you to hell. So friends, would you please be honest? But what about you? if you died tonight, where would you go? Would you go to heaven? Or would you go to hell? Well, maybe you've chosen, or maybe you're still not sure. That's okay. So to finish with a little review, we need a perfect record to get to a perfect heaven. There's only two ways we can get hold of a perfect record. The first one is by being a perfect person, but we've all blown that. But the other thing we could do is we could actually ask Jesus for his perfect record. So what were those two things Jesus said we must do to be forgiven? One, be willing to turn away from anything that you know is wrong in your life and say sorry to Jesus. And secondly, some way, somehow, find a way to make Jesus the most important person in your life.